Ladies and gentlemen, here we are, another session at the Airfreight Pharma digital event. And the title of the event is Essential Transport for an Essential Industry. So very apt indeed. Now, I've got two great guests with me, and to make things easier for me asking questions and just general discussion, I've got two Julians. So I've got Julian Sutch, Pharma Global Sales, Emirates, SkyCargo. Julian, lovely to meet you, lovely to see you, and nice to talk again.
Great, good to see you, Chris.
Thank you, sir. And then we've got Julian Wann, Global Category Leader, Freight and Logistics, AstraZeneca. So nice to see you as well, Julian.
Morning.
Morning. Yep. Okay, right. Now, gents, just a quick review of some of the points off your bio so that people know who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into it in more detail as we go into the session. So firstly, I'll start with you, Julian. Julian Sutch, Pharma Global Sales, Emirates, SkyCargo. So Julian is commercially responsible for Emirates, SkyCargo's global pharmaceutical division. And he was appointed in August 2016. He oversees the sales strategy, multinational tenders, global accounts, and tripartite relationships. Julian has been in the logistics industry for 13 years. And I'm pleased to say I've met you many times during that 13 years, Julian. So lovely to have you. Really appreciated.
Likewise.
And now we come to Julian Wann, who's again, the global category leader, freight and logistics, AstraZeneca. And he's got a team who manages the primary freight, which is around $110 million annually. And always looking for new options, always looking for new channels. And Julian has been doing this now for 9 years. And the intentions are to transport. This is an interesting one here. 2/3 of the global freight from air to sea. And obviously, huge focus on delivering cost, quality and service to the AstraZeneca business, particularly focusing on potential of new products and channels to reach more patients in the coming years. And what a great job you guys are doing. So thanks very much, Julian.
Welcome.
Right, now, gents, okay, everybody's been talking about, you know, what's happened with this pandemic and how things have benefited, how things have been a pain in one of those southern areas. But just from the two of you and having to work so closely together, as I know you do, and it doesn't matter which one of the Julians would like to start. So, you know, what have been the real big positive takeaways from this last 18 months with regards to how you guys have dealt together?
I can take
Mr.
that.
Wann, go ahead.
So the positive thing for us is that throughout this, we've maintained supply, we've maintained a service, and we've continued to distribute, and we've continued to access all the markets that we needed to. Sometimes it's been difficult, sometimes it's been a little bit challenging, but I think what it has given us is confirmation that what we're doing is right. Yeah. I think it's also given us a few opportunities. I think in the past months, we've still maintained new products to market, been able to continue doing what we do. It's also helped us learn a little bit about ourselves, I think, as a company. And I think it's allowed us to look inside a little bit more and perhaps pat ourselves on the back where relevant, but also at the same time, it's allowed us to realize that we need to change and that there are things that we do which we will no longer do. So it's been a great opportunity through what has been obviously quite a tumultuous time, but it's given us lots of opportunities and the opportunity to work with my other Julian here a little bit closer through the partners. And I think it's highlighted the relevance of working with people for a longer period of time. And it's just enabled us to work together a little bit closer and be particularly honest and open about the challenges we've had. So for us, that's, I think, some of the positives.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And the same question to you, Julian.
Yeah, I think you know, this pandemic threw a massive curveball at us, especially from an airline point of view, right? And so I think especially from an Emirates standpoint, we were very, very quick to start getting capacity back into the market to the key sectors which needed it. Predominantly at the very start, it was PPE and pharmaceuticals and fresh. You know, pharmaceuticals for us is our most important simply because of what it was. It's not just, let's say, things like vaccines, but it's all the pharmaceuticals that need to be moved around the world, right? We had to make sure that the capacity was there for it. We have some very strategic key lanes that we move large volumes. So, we were able to, when the whole airline, grounded aircraft, apart from a few freighters, we very, very quickly came together as an airline. Especially, you can imagine us all sitting in HQ with all our systems and the way we move capacity control, and we were all very much derived by that. And suddenly, then we're all at home, but we all came together. But not just that, but with our customers and suppliers and our strategic partners. What I would say is similar to what Julian said, is that we all came together and we saw a lot more tripartite stuff happening, a lot of direct relationships. It got very, for us, it was really interesting to not only is pharma, of course, important, but then to go into a scenario like that where you have to really identify and move very, very quickly to get capacity and start moving products again to the entire network.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, and I think one of the positives that anybody who's studying or reflecting, and I'm sure they will be in years to come, it's been an absolute catalyst of change, transformation, and also people accepting that data, communication, and collaboration is so important. And it's probably been one of the best examples within our industry for a long time, which came about as a result of this crisis.
Yeah, I think
absolutely. I mean, from our point of view, not only did we just ground aircraft overnight, but we couldn't just instantly fly somewhere we wanted, right? So all parts of the airline had to come together to create new routes, to get landing rights again. And when it really the pandemic really hit, you've then got crews all over the world that you've got to try and move about because of quarantine restrictions. And I mean, it was it's something we've never faced before. But I have to say, people came onto the table really quickly, got together, and we just made it happen. It was really good to see.
Yeah, no, and Julian, you were just about to say.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that we've learned from this is that we are still reliant on people, and good people are particularly worth their weight in gold. Yeah. And I think where you've got people that are perhaps not as experienced and somebody that more is, then that experience comes through. And I think the ability to communicate and pick up the telephone, I think, has been underrated. And I think my experience with Julian, my experience with some of the other people that we work with, particularly our forwarders, that email is great, but in a time of what this is, when we're all at home, you've got to make a more pronounced effort to make contact and talk to people. And having conversations, we've done it for the last few months. I've done it with the forwarders. I've talked to people and explained what we want. And I think without having people willing to support you, you're nothing. And I think that's also a great learn. I think technology is obviously an enabler, but behind it, you've got to have the right people willing to commit the time and the effort to actually make these things work.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's like I know both you boys are big into football, and if you look at some of the FIFA stats with the amount of teams that have lost more at home this or the last season than ever before because of the fact that they didn't have supporters. So you mentioned there about technology being an enabler, but people are most definitely the supporters in this major change, which has been in some cases been absolutely fantastic to see. It's brilliant. Julie, can I stay with you there on a point now? With looking at what you have to do, and now these new channels and new products and new areas and supporting patient need, etc., you have to have a lot more focus now upstream, not just passing it over to one party who then passes it to another, who then passes it to another. Now, has that made much of a difference, or has that been something that's really been focused on?
That's been focused on for the past 2 or 3 years anyway. We've been trying to move things to ocean freight. Yep. We utilize a lot of air freight, and at times like now, we realize having that end-to-end control for us and visibility of what's going on is key. It's something that as a company we've looked at for a number of years, how we interact with each part of the supply chain. I'm part of procurement. my colleagues that look after the operations, they work in supply chain, they're talking to planners. So the planners getting a little bit more of a feel for the logistics side of the things, the logistics teams being more in line with what happens at the end destination, whether it be through an airline, whether it be through the airline handler. I think during this thing, we've seen the need to understand what's going on. It's good that we've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years. We're very, very specific in terms of controls. Some of the controls, I think, been a little bit too specific. We need to be flexible, but you can't be flexible and make different decisions if you don't understand what happens at the end. I think in certain locations, we've seen things that have never happened before, whether that's through the pandemic or whether that's just what we would have seen anyway, who knows? But I think having that visibility of what's going on throughout our transportation links, whether it be whichever mode, I think has been a real sort of positive for us. I think it validates that we as a company, what we're doing is right. And I think, again, the people that are doing it understand the importance of it and are starting to understand more what happens in each little node to try and stop silly things happening. You know, there's all sorts of things happening. And the reality is, I heard somebody say something the other day, you can't control the event, but you can control the reaction. I think this has been how you actually react to what it is. I think in the past, some of the things we've seen where shipments have been delayed or held in transit or gone to the wrong place, I mean, that's happened. Just our reaction would have been very different. And I think we've taken a more pragmatic approach and understand that these things happen and that the next step is the most important one. So without having that view, I think we would have been in a difficult situation. I think right at the start of the whole pandemic, we probably had to scramble a bit to get the kind of view to everybody that we needed. But going forward, I think it's something that as a company we will continue to do and try and educate ourselves. And again, talking to, whether we talk to Emirates or other airlines or the forwarders, helping our people understand what their bit does, but then as importantly, what the next bit does and the next bit after that, because I think it's very easy to do what you need to do and then think, right, great, that's it. Everything's great, pass it on. And I think if it comes back to you then that something's not working, if you don't understand what happens at the other end, that reaction to how you either change it or make it right for the next time, that is very different. And I think that's something that we will continue to focus on going forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Julian. And, you know, sometimes in the past, because of people's lack of awareness of upstream, downstream, etc., it does have a negative impact sometimes, and even worse than sometimes what the actual event was. I think you're 100% right there. Now, Julian, with the changes over the many years, and you've been at the forefront of an awful lot of development within the pharma handling, have you seen an awful lot of change, you know, coming from downstream from the shippers regarding expectation and also tolerance with regards to service levels? Because I've been around your facilities quite a few times, and it's impressive to say the least.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's shippers, but also it's regulatory, right? I mean, we all have to follow GDP regulations, and that's the big one. But yeah, as pharmaceuticals change, as the type and how they're manufactured, I mean, what we move is very sensitive. You know, a large majority of it, and in strictly temperature control, right? So those controls have to stay from the minute we receive it to the minute we hand it over to the consignee. And during that point, there's many different handover of that specific, whether it goes to our handler, then comes back over to us, and then at destination it will go to another handler. But then not only you've got ground handlers, you've got ramp handlers, and a lot of people think that ground handlers do both. They don't, right? There's a ramp handler and a ground handler, and they're both separate. So because of that, there's many points, there's many risks, and it's really key to make sure that all those risks and points are tied up with SOPs and procedures, etc., to make sure it all flows. I mean, over the last 5-6 years, I think, there were a lot of generics that used to move as general cargo. That was the first big switch of volume that then moved over to temp control, specifically a lot that goes into the US. But then there's more types of complex pharma, gene therapy, all these types of things which need really, really specific temperature and time, right? Time has been really key. And as Julian said, especially with this pandemic, is making sure that we are informing our customers on new lanes we're coming into again, frequency of flights, cutoff times for drop-offs, all these different things. Expectations, are always going up. You can never be perfect, right? We started our product 2016 with the launch of our facilities and GDP and all that, and since then the goal is just to try and get better and better and better. There are still many places in the world that have lack of infrastructure that we try and help and develop. There are some major lanes that we have, and then we work very, very closely with handlers to make sure we can deliver what we promise, to the forwarders, to the shippers, also, the regulatory authorities, because we're very much tied in a lot with ministries of health, right? Specifically this year, moving different things. Ministries of health have got very involved in what we've been doing, especially here in Dubai as well. Dubai Ministry has been very active with us in developing our infrastructure, and also, because we move a lot for them. So it's been a very interesting journey.
Yeah, no, definitely. And now, can I ask you both? Obviously, pre-pandemic, certain parts of the industry and certain parts of any industry were more focused on risk and continuity and contingency than others. But as a result of this, it's made everybody now start to realise, you've got to be prepared for the worst case scenario to be able to respond, in the correct way. Now, as far as choices and making decisions with regards to which airport or which location, are you both now starting to see airports now making a concentrated effort to focus as part of their tactics or strategy on cargo and cargo associated products, which will stand them in good stead as normal passenger capacity starts to come back on?
I'll take it first. I'm probably not as well placed as Mr. Sutch to comment. I think we don't see it, being brutally honest. I think it's quite difficult, and I understand it's not. Having spoken to certain airports, I know that quite a lot of the larger ones focus very much on it. I think some of the other airports rely upon the ground handlers, rely upon the airlines and others to do that for them. I think for me, and I might be wrong, that's a potential gap that airlines and airports could just put some facilities in there that help move products at temperature control. Our expectation upon the freight forwarders, upon the truckers, whichever mode we ship, our expectation is quite high, because the expectation placed upon us is exceedingly high to maintain our products. So when we make selections from a procurement point of view, the expectation is based upon the ability to control our freight. I think as we look forward, we've done a lot of work. As I've said, we've got particular departments within logistics now that focus on risk, process, products moving through. It's still perceived to be the weakest link is probably at the airports. It might not be Dubai, it might not be Frankfurt, Paris, where they are fully focused on making that commitment. But unfortunately, not everything goes out of there and not everything goes into there. So it's like running a relay, isn't it? The team's only as quick as the slowest member.
Yeah.
So understanding our end to end is where, the previous point is that's where we're more aware now. So are the airports fully committed to it? I'm not sure. There may not be the volume for them to fully commit to it. So in the background, then I think the responsibility is on ourselves to make the right selections in terms of how we ship it, whether it be packaging, containers, whether we choose that certain areas don't have the infrastructure and therefore we have to try and get other modalities into those regions. I don't know, but for me, I don't see it, because I still see that when the challenges come and the questions are asked, if something doesn't work, a lot of the time it does point to when it's in transit through an airport or in customs and it's waiting, particularly now where customs can take longer because people aren't there, the processes have changed. We've seen a lot of events in certain airports with products being affected in certain ways by certain things, without mentioning specifics, that we wouldn't have said before. So for me, is that just a tale of the pandemic? Don't know. But it's certainly an opportunity, I think, where airports and those that run airports can consider the type of products that are going through now and will continue to go through, and perhaps make just some sort of concerted effort, not even the right word, to just make a difference. But maybe I'm wrong, Mr. Sutch. I'll let you tell me I'm wrong, or I'll let you nod your head and tell me I'm right.
And just you respond to that, Julian. What I was going to say to you is, being as well positioned as you are, with such a huge network, you're able to see the different capabilities all around the world.
No, very much so. And Julian's right. There are huge gaps. I mean, there has, believe it or not, been a huge improvement over the past 5 years. I think, most of Europe is, let's say, up to speed, but then let's take somewhere like the US, where you would think, oh, well, it must have the infrastructure. In fact, it doesn't. For us, Chicago is actually our biggest destination in the world for pharma, driven by some key origin markets. And so we knew we had to make a concerted effort. So we partnered with a specific ground handler and built a miniature version of what we had in Dubai to look after that. And that was predominantly to look after our, inbound cargo. However, once we'd built that facility, we then saw a huge opportunity for outbound business, of which, of course, there is a lot ex-Chicago as well. We operate freighters, packs not just back to Dubai, but we have freighters into Europe as well from Chicago. So we're then able to start moving pharmaceuticals from the US into Europe as well. However, but the US has got a long way to go. Let's take New York. There's huge struggles. There's limited space. There's the opportunities are there, but it takes a lot of work. So Europe is fairly covered, but around the rest of the world, there are efforts being made. If you look at, there are some key airports that have made big waves: Miami, Brussels, Singapore, who have created these, kind of pharma networks within them, which is the airport, the airlines, the forwarders, the handlers, the ramp handlers, and they've all come together to create a pharma community. However, a lot more need to do that, especially at some of the big places in the world. But then again, we move pharma to every single destination we fly, and there is a huge difference between one to another. There's a couple of standout places in Africa, for example, but only two that I can specifically think of who really know how to handle pharma. The rest of it is lacking, and that's just where Julian said you then have to identify the risk and then look at types of packaging potentially to make sure it's looked after at destination. As a carrier, we can notify the consignee as soon as the aircraft arrives. They can be ready with the documentation, but there can be delays. So we try and mitigate as much as possible. But a huge focus we've had with all of our ground handlers around the world is how pharma is so important to us, that when we go out to, if we have an opportunity where there's, there are airports, remember, where there's only one handler, and then of course we're very much tied to what risk factors we can put around that. However, if there are multiple handlers in the airport, we will definitely choose the one that has the capability for specifically pharma, but of course some of the other products that we fly. So there's been an improvement. There are a lot underway. If you look at Saudi Arabia, they've made huge improvements over the last couple of years. And Saudi is, biggest destination in the Middle East. However, there's a long way to go, right? There's definitely a long way to go, but I think the momentum is definitely starting to build.
Yeah, which is great. Now, for the public who've probably taken more notice of supply chain and who the main parties are and how everything works as a result of this pandemic, it's been a great learning experience for them, and it's obviously interested lots of the next generation of youngsters who are going to come into the industry. Now, some of the things that, you know, people talk to me about, and I'm sure you two get an awful lot of this during conversation, is when something as sensitive is produced, and then the risk assessment is done, they understand those risks, and then they package it accordingly. And that the packaging is now becoming so good that obviously, you know, a temperature excursion influences the longevity of the packaging effectiveness, but all of that is almost like put into a calculation. So they understand it. And then with airports now and with handling agents having to invest so much in pharma products, if customs and food and drugs and everything is able to become a lot faster and a lot more risk focused with regards to the data sharing, the speed and the throughput hopefully will start to enhance. So do you both see then, you know, the need for such really, really effective facilities everywhere, or do you think it's something that should be focused then as a more of a contingency to an airport, whereby there's a facility that can cater for anything that needs that extra attention, rather than the cost of putting it into place for the GHAs?
Well, I think it's better if they have it. I don't think it's just pharma that requires some of those conditions.
Yeah.
I think as an industry, we talk about standardization, but we could probably talk with Julian from an AZ perspective. We have a process with our forwarder, and then somebody else, another company, will have a process. And I think for the ground handlers, I have a degree of sympathy, and for the airlines, they're handling what is technically a same product within a temperature range. And the guy on the ground, going back to my earlier point, the importance of people, does he necessarily know what product is with who? Could we do something more collaboratively and have more of a standard way of moving pharma so that it always moves in the right temperature, irrespective of the company? If the airport has somewhere that can enable that to happen, then it will make it simpler. The investment by the GHA or the airline or IATA is not necessarily monetary then. It's in simplifying how it works. And if you can make it work simple, the people that are important are the guys driving the forklift trucks, taking it off the airline, driving it down the ramp into a warehouse, processing it, helping the customs guy clear it, move it through the warehouse, and move it onto the truck to its next point. If we can do something about that, perhaps the investment is more in time than money. And then we all see the benefit, which ultimately is for a patient. The patient wants the product. The expectation of you, myself, Julian, when you take a medicine, you expect it to have gone through the supply chain in its entirety, in its completeness. Now, we make every effort we can to do that. As an industry, perhaps we need to take a look at it. We've got lots of different qualifications. We've got lots of different certifications. But the poor guy that's driving the forklift or the guy that's on the truck, does he necessarily know the difference? And does he understand the impact? So do they understand the impact like we have to see the end-to-end supply chain? The guy at the other end, does he understand what happens if he doesn't do his little bit? But if you give him 10 different pallets, each with a different process, does that not see its way through to causing a problem? So I see it like that myself. I think there's the opportunity for us to gain the improvements, not just for AZ, but for Emirates, for the airlines, and for our other pharma colleagues.
I think that's I totally agree. I've had the privilege to attend a couple of facilities whereby they focused on all of the products that they actually distribute, and they had the names of the products and the companies, obviously, but they also had what the treatment was, so that every single person realized that what they were touching or the way in which they were transferring those packaging was for somebody that they would have known, whether it was a family member, whether it was a loved one, whether it was a friend, whether it was a colleague. and they all had a real genuine sense of care. It was such a nice culture to see that they knew that what they were doing was good for somebody. And a couple of the people that I spoke to, they even said that, you know, when they go home, they're having tea with a family and everything, they're explaining to the kids or their partners, etc., how much they were able to produce and distribute and what an impact that would make and what it was used for. And it brought a different discussion around. So I think the awareness is so important. And Julian, I know the amount of effort you put with your guys, the training, you know, and this score on the floor, you know, how good people are on the floor is so important, because the statistics and the numbers and, you know, the forecasting is one thing, but the people on the floor who are actually taking that responsibility, they need an awful lot of credit and support as well.
For me, I think the value of your truck driver, the value of the people, what Julian and I discuss, what I discuss at a different level, it almost becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
Grammar's terrible, but there's an irrelevance to it. If it doesn't cascade through to others, then there's a gap, and that's the gap that we end up filling and finding excuses for. And I think the quicker we learn it, the more we standardize it, that will help everybody, I think, and that will make a big difference to us all.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like I said, in Julian's absence there, because I think he's just dropped off because of a connectivity issue there. But you know, having experienced the facility there, I mean, the way the guys and girls are trained is exceptional, and the focus on competence and repeat information and communication, that's what makes people proud of their job as well.
No, it does. And I mean, from an AZ perspective, we're obviously, that's what we're, you know, proud of. We see the impact that we can have on people throughout, whether it's family members or not. And I think the communication and the discussions that I have with Julian plus others and the effort they put in is great. I think, again, events happen. It's the reaction to it. And I think as you go through it, the reaction could be, we are able to simplify things and make it more consistent. We see it in the press all the time about things that are going on now. You know, what we do and how we do it. Could we do a little bit more together from an industry point of view, without looking at costs, without looking at revenues, and just how we can make a difference. And if we can find ways to do that, then the revenues and the cost for us,
exactly,
it takes care of itself, because it's the time, you know, when something goes wrong, how much time do we have to invest from ourselves, from our freight forwarding partners, from the airlines, to understand what happens? Is that the best use of time? I don't think anybody thinks it is. And I think everybody would like to say it works perfectly, permanently.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it probably never will, but at least with that far-reaching understanding, simplification, you can spot the gaps and fill them.
Yep, no, 100%. And like you said, for every little amount of time that we're able to shave off, we're able to do something else with that time, which you know, could be more effective.
And from a time perspective through shipments, if criticality of time is considered, speed is always considered to be the optimum. I see it differently. If somebody says to me, we can do it next day every time and it works, great. If somebody equally says, we'll do everything in 72 hours or we'll do everything in 96 hours, but on the back of that, that means that we've got a much more streamlined way of working and a process, then I think that's fine, as long as we know it takes that long. Yeah. If we can build that into our planning processes, if we can understand that that's what the supply chain needs, I think that's where, from a learning point of view, we've also seen that, because things take longer now because the availability of capacity doesn't necessarily match our demand. In some cases it does. Different modes have got different challenges. If we can flatten the supply chain and take that curve away from the supply chain, if it means, I mean, it's not great if we have to extend the supply chain, but if we can extend it and it's consistent and we know it works and we can rely upon it, an extra 24 hours is not going to make much difference, because if we try and do it in 24 hours, but then it takes us 5 days to investigate what went wrong. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, you know, as long as we're able to build reality in, because it just shows how fragile everything is at the moment. I mean, even, you know, from drivers, you know, fuel, you know, everything's been
internet connections.
Internet, there you go, internet connections in this day and age. Yeah. Now, poor old Julian, but hopefully he'll get back on before the end of the session. But if not, you know, as always, I mean, you know, the man has done so much within the industry. He's got a great reputation, and I don't think he needs to speak that much about what's happened, because it's well known. But there's one point I'd like to focus on just before we do go, and perhaps it's a shame that he's not there. But Julian, you know, people are aware now of so many more threats to business. Okay, so in my opinion, cybersecurity is a terrible one that people have underestimated for far too long, and probably still underestimate today. But also, you know, these fake and copy products. Firstly, I think that's so unacceptable, and I can't believe that people would do something like that, and especially not when it comes to pharmaceuticals or therapeutics that have got so much of an impact on human beings. I just think it's totally abhorrent. It's an awful thing to do. Now, how serious is that for you guys in your industry?
It's very serious, obviously. It's one of the biggest things we have to deal with. And again, we have a significant amount of people looking at it and working together within the supply chain. We've got people that are constantly assessing the potential threat and taking every threat very seriously. I won't go into too much detail, obviously, but from a transportation perspective, from a procurement perspective, we have to be extremely diligent when we're selecting suppliers, when we're selecting locations. I think the challenge now is that ordinarily you would go and visit a location, you would sit down with people, you would get a greater feel for it. Our supply chain security people would be doing a thing. We'd be doing the same things. I think a lot of it being done virtually has meant there's a reliance on partners, and there's a reliance on people in the markets to assess that risk on our behalf. We've got global teams looking at it. Counterfeit is a huge threat.
Yeah.
Supply chain security is a huge threat. During the past 18 months, with many of the products, the new products that we launch, you know, a lot of them are quite interesting to others that we wouldn't particularly want them to be interested in. I think the reality is, in certain cases, our products aren't quite as interesting as maybe some high value electronics. But for us, the impact of them getting into the wrong hands and being used or copied and not being effective, ultimately it's patient effectiveness. You know, spoke about as a company, that is our forefront. We put our patients first, and we will do just about anything to ensure that they get there. Obviously, as a business, we have to manage everything else in the background, but supply chain security is becoming more prominent, and the expectation is just like temperature management. The expectation upon people at, you know, Julian's organisation at Emirates, whether we are freight forwarders who we use, our expectation is that they have the same effectiveness and the same high levels that we put down on them. So we have lots of different processes to assess a third-party risk, whether we through process just through a particular lane, if it's going to a specific country, or if it's a warehouse that we know has been affected by some sort of theft, and that we will deal with it in whichever way we can. Again, you can't necessarily deal with the event, you can't influence the event, it's the reaction.
Yeah.
We try and prevent the event, and we try and think carefully. You know, if you look at trucking, you've got drivers driving across the continent, driving across Europe. When it comes to the end of their hours, we tell them you must park in a secure spot. But all all it takes is 2 or 3 hours in the traffic or some other event that you can't control, and the reaction is that they can't reach that parking spot. You've got to ask them or try and help them make the right decision. And I know that somebody in our organisation's already looking at, on the basis of next 2 years, we'll change it, different products, new products, cold chain, different markets, larger volumes, smaller volumes, trying to enhance our standard, but also make that standard so that the driver at the end of it knows what's the minimum we expect. Is it that he backs his truck against a wall and stays with the truck?
Exactly, yeah.
So, we will do everything we possibly can to prevent our products going into the wrong hands, because ultimately, like I say, copy, counterfeit, that's not what we want. So we have to manage everything within the supply chain with our partners. So how we work with them, what we help them understand, what we stop them doing, what they stop us doing. Equally, they could see something that we think will work. They can come back to us and say, no, if you do that, this could be the effect. It's about us working together effectively all throughout that supply chain, from our manufacturing to our suppliers' manufacturing, right through to distribution to the market. So it is a very big area for us to concentrate on and fully focus on.
Yeah, no, and it shows how important it is. And you touch there, primarily on counterfeit and copy and fake and everything else. But the other issue is just the general security. And in Julian's absence, I can only say how strong the security is at their facilities and how much emphasis they put on their process with regards to handling security. And it's so important, whether it's CCTV coverage, separate units, visuals, all the things that are done, 4 eyes when it's being transported out to the aircraft, all sorts of things are being done. But the thing that you mentioned there about, the continual upgrading of people's awareness and other elements that come in that are risk assessed and that are shared, the data is shared. That's the way forward. And that's something I think that this crisis has made people realise, there's a lot more confidence in people sharing what's important rather than protecting it for themselves.
Yeah, I think there's more of a willingness as well.
Yeah.
I think perhaps 2 years ago, there was a perceived sort of, we would hold it to our chest, they would hold it to, you can't do that. The more you talk, the more you understand, it helps you make a difference. I know that the guy, Julian and his team, they talk to us all the time. They talk to us through our forwarders, they talk to us with our forwarders. We talk to so it's about that 3-way conversation and being consistent with it. I think it's good that, I think it's one of the positives for me out of this whole situation is that we speak a lot more often, and I think and gain an understanding just what the impact is on their business, and get an understanding how we can do something different in the future. How can I help him? And in return, he helps me. It's not about cost. It's not about money. We're looking at sustainability. The sustainability of the airlines is key for everybody.
Exactly.
For them as well. And it's the ability to be able to move products. So can I buy into his free space? Who knows? Does he have free space? That means I've got extra capacity. That's the sort of conversation that we perhaps didn't have 2 years ago. We may have had it through the forwarder. But now we've got that direct line in, and the guys we work with at our forwarders, they know we're doing this.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, the more we do this, it helps them as well, because I might find out something that they don't.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Pique my interest that perhaps they won't consider worthy to us, that we can have a little chat about and put something in place that helps everybody. And I think that's the key. We've got to help each other get through this and improve, because in the next 6, 12, 18 months, we're all looking hopefully to get back to a sense of normality, whatever normality will be.
Exactly. No, you're right there. And the sustainability of business is so important. And, sometimes people focus on one area of sustainability, but at the end of the day, it's got to be profitable. It needs people and process, and that's where it'll come from. Now, Julian, I don't think Julian is going to get back online before we finish. So, what I would have done with both of you, and I'll do with yourself, please, if you don't mind, is just to finish. What would you like to see happen within the supply chain teamwork or collaboration platform moving forward? If you were able to say, right, that's what I want to see happen now, what would that be?
Some of the things that I spoke to before, I think the airlines, IATA, airports should be working together. I think perhaps pharma companies, other supply chains should be a little bit more collaborative. At a time when capacity is key, I'm sure there are a lot of things moving around with spare capacity that we don't know about. So I think the opportunity for us to be a bit more open about working together without fear of, reprisals in terms of cost. I think cost is an element that we can leave out. But at a time when carbon's important, reduction of carbon as a company, we have our targets, I know Emirates do. There are things that we can do about how we optimize what we do and how we consolidate what we do. That's an opportunity. And then with the airports, if we can simplify processes, standardize it, make it so that the people on the ground have got a simple way of working that means that it works on time every time, I think there's the opportunity. And I think through that, the only way you can do that is for willingness for people to actually work together more. Be a bit more collaborative without worrying that they're doing something that affects the business. And I think businesses have all been affected. Some have prospered, some not so much, some will come back, some won't. And I think the ones that are key, it's important that we rely on these guys. We move a lot of sea freight, we move a lot of road freight, we move a lot of air freight. We will always do that. Within our focus the next 2-3 years is very much how can we do it better. We want it to be right every time, all the time, so that the people that are relying on our products, their expectation is fulfilled each time. And I think as an industry, being able to talk to the two Julians, sound like some sort of not funny comedy Julian, but for the ability for us to talk and come up with different ideas and solutions that perhaps will benefit us, benefit him, and benefit others, I think there's got to be an openness to that going forward, which will make this situation, were it to happen again, perhaps a little bit more simple to find solutions for.
Sorry we lost you. We did continue without you, but it's better now that you've come back. So we're so pleased. So thank you for joining us again. And just to go over where we were and a few points that I'd like to cover with yourself. We were saying with the other Julian how incredible this focus now and collaboration with regards to viewing things as more of a relay team rather than each doing a 100-meter sprint.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being aware of what everybody does before and what everybody does afterwards, and being realistic. One of the interesting points Julian stated was that, time obviously is so important, but what he said was more important is accuracy and reliability and being practical. And so what he said was, if most people would say, no, we want it in 48 hours, and somebody else can say, well, we can do it in 72 hours or 4 days max, and it's always going to be done within that period of time, they can plan for that, which is encouraging, huh?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and he's spot on, right? I mean, again, the key thing is keeping that temperature, right? All the passive systems and active systems that are used have a lifespan, especially the passive shippers, and so the key is to know exactly what time frame you have and make sure you deliver it within that frame. I think the important thing with especially with airlines, with frequencies changing, times changing, new destinations coming up, is being key to make sure that they're aware of that. And then for sure, if you look back over the last 10 years, let's say with Airfreight Pharma, I've been doing this. It's the most conversations I've had. And we've been speaking, as Julian also mentioned, we've been speaking much more face to face,
Yeah.
using these kind of networks to speak to each other. Pre-COVID, I was on a plane the entire time, running around the world, seeing everyone. But actually, the video conferencing, I think, has definitely helped. It's great to see someone's face, to be able to speak to them, and we've been using it a huge amount. I've been keeping up and doing key talks every week with key customers, and especially a lot of the stuff that's come up has been massive project work, specifically to do with the vaccines. Right, we've moved over 250 million doses now of vaccines, and that's taken a lot of combined effort from all parties, right? And everyone needs to know exactly the capacity that's needed, the flight that's needed, the time that's needed for the passive shipper to last, etc. So for sure, it's been it's been really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, exactly, brilliant. And then, Julian, we broached a subject which is, in my opinion, it's terrible. This counterfeit goods and fraudulent behaviour. I mean, especially with something so sensitive that affects so many lives. I just can't fathom how anybody would even consider doing such a thing.
Yeah, so there's that is a key part. Security is hugely important, and of course, whilst the product is with us, we keep an eye on it every step of the way. However, we receive something, and of course, we hope it is what it is. I think predominantly a lot with, let's say, with the vaccines to start with, it's been a very, very closed network. You've had governments ordering direct from manufacturers, and there's been a very, very closed, secure chain all the way through. But let's say we move into, people are talking about these vaccines becoming almost a flu jab for every year, and so it will move away from direct government contacts and move to more the kind of move to distributors and the normal flows of how normal vaccines work. And then, counterfeit is a massive problem. I know serialization, specifically into a lot of destinations, has come up. The manufacturers are doing everything they can. However, I remember I was on a conference a few years ago, and the quality of these counterfeit, even the packaging, is so good now. Sometimes it can almost be seen to be better. And it's something the whole industry is definitely addressing. It comes up in all the conferences that happen. We definitely talk about it on many conference calls that we have on how we stamp it out. From a carrier's point of view, it's very difficult though, however, right? Because we receive cargo, we receive it from our known agent who we think is a known shipper, but at the end of the day, we don't open boxes and go into it and actually identify it, right? But we work exceptionally close with our forwarding partners and with the shippers. So it's, counterfeit definitely does happen, but I definitely do not think it happens between ourselves, our key big global forwarders and shipping partners. It's always ones that have been that it seems to come into the supply chain at different points. But it's a huge problem that everyone is trying to address. And hopefully, of course, it will improve.
Yeah, and equally, hopefully, the penalties and rewards for whistleblowing or people who are able to stop this, that's going to have to be really, really ramped up, to make it.
No, and I think it is. I think security, from the security side and the customs side and identification side, again with serialization. I think on the key big types of treatments, I think of course it's very, very difficult for them to get into the supply chain. But these criminals are able to do it. So as a team, as a group of organizations, and part of the whole supply chain, along with regulators, we must do everything we can to try and stamp it out.
Yeah, no, 100%. Another issue, obviously, just security as security. CCTV, special storage areas, special process, 4 eyes on ramp transfer, etc. Do you want to just run us through, how much emphasis is put on that?
Oh, sure. I mean, especially from a pharmaceutical point of view. I mean, if you look at the daily, we do approximately 250, 300 tons a day now of just temp control pharma, and it's our responsibility responsibility to make sure it's kept in a tighter security from the minute. So it all starts with our handling partners, who we go through stringent procedures to make sure they have the security in place. But likewise, yeah, in Dubai as well, in our hub, there isn't one moment where a shipment cannot be seen by camera, right? And it's all part of keeping that security tight, because the value of pharmaceuticals now, especially certain types of
Yes,
gene
yes.
therapy, etc., it's huge. And so wherever you get values like that, there are criminal entities who want a piece of it. So so from our point of view, we have a global security team who align our processes with the very point at which we accept the cargo to the minute we deliver it over to the consignee.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And like I said, I've experienced it there myself. And obviously the thing that you have to take into account then is mitigating against other areas that might not have it as good as it should be, which is always going to be a challenge until there's, equilibrium across the whole supply chain. So, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, big challenge.
Yep.
But now, something else, Julian, that I was always impressed with when I came to your facilities was, the level of focus that you put on the training and leadership and understanding and appreciation and the competencies of the people. And we were talking about score on the floor, which is where it really, really matters. And getting that importance down to the people who do that day in and day out, so that they feel pride in what they do and they feel engaged and they feel of value. That's so important now, even more so with the amount of people that have been displaced from our industry who probably won't come back, and the amount of experience that's drifted off.
Yeah, no, that's been, look, there's been some huge challenges this year, and one of the worst, airlines and the airline industry has been badly affected. But if you just look at the pandemic, what we had to go through when, we were able to get aircraft up in the skies, of course, but then we have to have them handled at all destinations, origins in the world, and those people working in those companies also were getting coronavirus, right? So they were leaving work. So you had high skilled force leaving the office, and we had planes landing, and they needed to be offloaded, and cargo needed to be handled extra. So it was a huge challenge to be able to get that done. There are so many points in that those in the industry don't realize. It's not. Air freight has to move exceptionally quickly, especially pharma, and you've got to keep it temperature controlled, and you've got to run through all the processes, and training and the skill of the team is highly important. And when you suddenly lose those from something unexpected like this, you have to scrabble fast to come up with solutions. Luckily, we did not see any failures because of the concentration that we have from a headquarters point of view. We have a whole team. I think you probably know Bert, who works alongside me in operations, and his whole team. And it comes from the very top. It comes from Henrik, who you also know. He's and Nabil. It's a very pharma is a huge focus for us, and it has been for especially over the last 5 years since we launched the product. But this year, we've had our challenges when it comes to the handling. Even in our hub here, right? We had the teams catching it as well, and not turning up to work. And you had quarantines, and you had. It's been a very, very interesting year to be a part of, air freight and the supply chain, and it's thrown things at us. But I have to say, the team got together, and we overcame them.
Yeah, and again, it's another great endorsement for the industry, isn't it, Julian? How agile we can be when it's necessary, and the speed of pivot and strength. It's an incredible thing, and thank heaven the whole world now has started to take a lot more notice and give a lot more recognition and appreciation to what everybody does, which is wonderful for the whole industry. Right, brilliant, Julian. Another little glitch there, but it just shows how good this is and how quickly you're able to get back to us. So really appreciate it. Now, what I'd like to do just to finish, Julian, is I'm just going to ask you something now, and just off the top of your head, what would you like to see happen within the supply chain teamwork and collaboration platform moving forward? If you were the one who was able to, wave a magic wand and say, right, that's what I'd like to see happen, what would it be now after all the learnings?
So, yeah, great question. There are a number of things. One, I think there has been amazing, even closer collaboration with all parties, right? So we've worked even closer with our forwarding partners. I think the communication has got a lot better, a lot of tripartite stuff where we work very closely with our forwarding partners and shippers to make sure that everyone knows what is happening with a specific shipment or project. Of course, from an airline point of view, we would love passengers to come back to the skies because that means we get more aircraft into the air. There's more capacity into the market, there's more destinations, there's more frequencies, and that of course benefits cargo, specifically benefits pharmaceuticals for having more options for our customers, right? So
Indeed.
I mean, those would be the two key highlights.
Indeed. Good. All right, my friend. Well, listen, I thank you very much. I know how valuable your time is and how busy you are, but really appreciate
Likewise, Chris.
everything, and also with the technical issues.